Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Turndog Talks To. I'm very lucky to be joined today by Corbett Barr, who is the man behind Insanely Useful Media, which has several sites under its remit, but I think the one most people know Corbett for is Think Traffic. At least that's how I came across Corbett. And we're going to talk today about overcoming mistakes and adversity. But before we do all that, please, first of all, thank you for joining me, Corbett, and just tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Matthew. As you said, I run a blog called Think Traffic, which is really all about how to attract an audience online. I've been doing that for about 3.5 years, and around that blog, I run a small business. There's just three of us in the company, and essentially we have a training library for entrepreneurs, and we just try to help small-time entrepreneurs, sort of the everyday entrepreneur, make more progress in his or her business every week. That's really our primary goal. Personally, I've been an entrepreneur for around 10 years. I've been fully self-employed since early 2006, and I had some other attempts at being an entrepreneur, which led to failures, and we can talk about that if you'd like to. But yeah, that's basically me in a nutshell.
Fantastic. And I know that if you're setting up a blog or an online site, an online business of any kind, there are certain blogs and websites that you will follow, and I think Traffic's certainly one of them. And I know that you work with some rather cool individuals, people like Scott Dinsmore, for instance. And yeah, I think you're generally an individual who people get to know if they're on the online sphere. But I'm sure you've got quite a few obstacles that you've faced over time and tales of adversity. So let's kick straight in. That this is all for the successful mistake, and those who don't know, it's a book about overcoming mistakes, not being afraid of them. And I'm intrigued to know what your big mistake is and how it all came about. So please tell us that tale.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I kind of look at mistakes as like, losing a battle, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you lost the war, right? And so I never think of like, anything that I've done as a major mistake in life necessarily, because it all led to where I am today. And, you have to reconcile all of that and be happy with where you're at, regardless of those things, and maybe just learn for different things to do in the future. But I've made plenty of mistakes entrepreneurially along the way. I mean, like I said, I started out in 2003 with my first attempt to build an online business, and nothing that I built prior to 2009 still exists today. So there was a good 6-year span where everything that I tried, maybe lasted for a while, but eventually fell apart and collapsed. And those were all learning experiences. And those are things where, sometimes they were big and painful, and it really made you question, everything about what you were doing. But that gives you a new base, I think, to start out from and to work from. So, yeah, I mean, plenty of mistakes along the way.
And I love how you mention it. It's losing a battle rather than a war, because there's very few wars out there where you don't at least lose the odd battle. And I always use a lot of sport analogies in what I do, because I'm a big sports fan, and it's very rare that a team will go throughout a season without losing a game. It doesn't mean that they're doomed for failure throughout the season. And in the same way as teams who have massive dynasties, it doesn't mean that they're not going to lose finals and big games along the way. And quite often big players need those big losses to really drive them forward to bigger and better things.
Yeah, and as entrepreneurs, we don't even have to be that good. I think you could win one game out of 5 or something, and it could still be a huge success for you if the one that you win is big enough, and if it's later in your career or whatever, that's fine. So I think that we like to, as a society, we like to sort of glamorize success stories and act as though that was the only thing that entrepreneur or that person ever tried to do. And we don't really look into their history too much and see what led to that success. And we also like to glamorize people who got lucky, frankly, on the first try. I mean, there are people who start out and have a home run right away, but that's really the exception. It's not the rule. Of the entrepreneurs that I know, people have been down in the trenches, like really struggling to make something work for a long time, and maybe they had a mild success before or something. But usually the people that now aren't, the people that spent a decade digging in the ditch and really getting the work done.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of people know you through Think Traffic. They see your blog getting huge hits and generally making a very good go of things. But you said for 6 years you had businesses that maybe started, got to a certain point, but then ultimately failed. So I'm interested to hear maybe a particular story from one of those sort of past businesses and where it maybe did unravel, where a mistake sort of occurred, but it maybe helped you build a new business, possibly even Think Traffic
Yeah.
and what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think the thing that really turned my entrepreneurial journey around for me was the concept of building an audience around a particular problem and then delivering products and services to that audience specifically, because it's really easy as an entrepreneur to build a product or service sort of in a bubble where you're creating something and eventually going to put it out to the world and hope that they love it. And a lot of times, if you're not having enough interaction with that audience, it's easy to sort of get off track and create something that in the end nobody really wants. And I think that's really the biggest risk as an entrepreneur. In my prior life, before building this blog-based business, I actually did a sort of traditional, if you will, Silicon Valley venture capital-backed startup where I partnered with a co-founder and we created a software prototype and shopped it around for the better part of a year to investors, to venture capitalists, to try to get someone to back us. And we did. We actually ended up raising around $3 million and built an office and a team and spent a lot of time building some software that was essentially in the email prioritization space. And just a number of things happened. I think we, as I said, didn't pay attention enough to the specific needs of our customers. We had this like big grand vision of what we wanted to build, and we weren't solving an immediate enough problem for those people to really get to that big vision. And also, the market changed a little bit. I think the nature of email changed, and spam became less of a problem, and Gmail became better and better at handling those things. So anyway, I made a run of that for 3 years. We had an office with 10 people, and it was my day-to-day thing, and it really felt like it might be, my legacy project, a really big thing that I do. And it ended up collapsing and falling apart in 2008, and mostly because the financial world collapsed, and we weren't able to raise enough money to keep the entire team together, and we were just faced with a bunch of really hard decisions about letting people go and changing the course of the business and that sort of stuff. And for me at that point, it became time to really step back and reevaluate what I wanted from my life and my career. And I decided to take a 6-month sabbatical, and my wife and I took a road trip to Mexico from our place here in California. And that was really a journey of self-discovery and of thinking about what I wanted my next business to be about. And that's really what started my blogging career while we were on that journey.
Wow. And raising, $3 million plus, having something lasting 3 years, and then to see it fail, that's got to have been, certainly have an emotional strain in it. I'm assuming it had certain financial strains too, but I would imagine the big one would be the emotional thing, because you've had the team of people, you've worked with the investors, and all of a sudden it's like, right, back to square one now. And that, I think a lot of entrepreneurs out there face that. They have a great idea, they maybe even have the audience, but for whatever reason it just doesn't quite work out, and then to pick yourself back up, it's got to be a tough thing to do.
It was tough. It was really tough. I mean, that entire 3-year period was just a giant emotional roller coaster, which we go through as entrepreneurs. But I think especially when you're trying to play at that level where you're raising a lot of money and you're spending other people's money to build the business, and you're hoping for a really big hit. I mean, as soon as you raise money from investors like that, it just changes the whole dimension of the game. You really have to be aiming for millions of potential users for your service, as opposed to something that just organically grows and supports a small team or whatever. So it's a big roller coaster. You go from the lowest lows, thinking that everything's over, to raising money and then having the highest of highs, and then every day just thinking that either this isn't going to work or it's going to be the best thing ever. You know, you just kind of vacillate between those two things. And then eventually just to have it all, you know, to see the writing on the wall and to have it all come collapsing down, that was a dark period for a few months. And I knew that it was so emotionally traumatic that I wasn't really in a good state of mind to think about what I wanted to do next. And that's really why we decided to hit the reset button and take a sabbatical and really just reconnect with who I am and what I wanted from life and what I wanted to do, and to take things, you know, just slowly step by step from there.
And I personally think that's the bravest thing of the entire story there, because when something like that fails, I think the easy thing, and the thing maybe people panic in doing, would be, I need to now get a job, or I need to go straight into my next idea. I need to, you know, just keep on moving. But then to take a complete step back and 6 months traveling around to sort of rediscover yourself and find that passion, that's a pretty brave thing to do. But obviously, I'm guessing that led you to discover what you wanted. And did it maybe sort of lead you away? I don't want to go down the investment route now. I'd rather build something a bit more organic.
Yeah, those thoughts started to percolate while I was on that trip. I mean, really, you know, I thought that when we went on that trip that what would happen was I would take a couple of months off, reconnect with myself, sort of think things through, and then eventually come up with the next idea that I wanted to build in kind of a similar way, maybe raise investment and go through that whole process again. But while we were down there, sort of serendipitously, we just started meeting people who were really interesting and living different kinds of lifestyles that I didn't really know were possible before. These people weren't rich or retired in any way, but they had figured out ways to live in a foreign country for many months out of the year. Some people were permanent travelers. Other people maybe had careers that they could put on hold for a period of time. And I didn't know that was possible. You know, these people had sort of made their careers work around their lives instead of the other way around. Because, you know, when you think about what we're all trying to build here, it's really easy to get caught up thinking about money and status as the ultimate goal, right? And to sort of adopt everyone else's goals, especially if you're in an ambitious place, you know, like California, like Silicon Valley, everyone is chasing these dreams, and you don't necessarily know that you want that dream. It just feels like you should because everyone else wants it. But in the end, you have to ask, what's the end goal? You know, after you build this company and have this money and status and everything, what are you going to do from there? And really, what are the realistic chances that you're going to build some massive Facebook-like success? It's very slim. So I started studying these other people who had figured out ways to live really interesting lives, almost as if they were retired, but they weren't. They just had made their careers work around their lives. And I simply started blogging about that because I found it interesting, and I wanted to ask myself those questions sort of out loud about what I wanted from my career and my life, and how the two should integrate together. And I spent, you know, the next year or so blogging about that and just really thinking about it for myself and how I was going to build my next business in a way that really let me live a more interesting lifestyle, basically. And that was 4.5 years ago that I started that process.
And it's amazing just sometimes taking a step back. I mean, this is obviously rather a grand mistake and rather a grand step back in the sense of going travelling. But I personally find sometimes, even if you're making a sort of smallish mistake, just getting yourself out of that little bubble, whether it's going for a walk or a run, anything really, just taking a day off. Sometimes it just opens up your mind. You meet people who you might not otherwise meet. And it just does give you that different perspective and makes you think, actually, you know, what do I want from all this?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. You just have to, like, you know, compose yourself and put yourself back together and not just jump right into things, because it's really easy to make an emotional decision that's not, you know, your true self, I think.
Fantastic. So that trip very much led to sort of a rediscovering and showing you a different world where actually I can achieve something where it isn't as stressful. I can maybe build it a little bit more organically, and I can focus on things that I'm very passionate about and sort of take it from there. And like you say, over the last 4.5 years, you've worked with some incredible individuals, and you have a site which is certainly one of the sort of forebearers for things like blogging and online entrepreneurship.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I mean, I think that it's very easy to live, as I said, within other people's constraints and to feel like you have to follow other people's ideas of what success looks like. And the world changes so fast, especially with technology. The world has been changing so quickly over the past couple of decades. I think those notions that we have of what success has to look like are simply there just because people are afraid to try new things, maybe. But that doesn't mean that those new things can't, pretty easily work out. And also, I think it's useful, as you said, to take a walk or whatever. I took a rather long walk, a road trip. And it's also useful just to get away from your normal influences, to get away from your family and your coworkers and the friends that you see down at the pub or whatever who are just doing the same thing with their life over and over again and have quick opinions about anyone who's trying to do something new and interesting. To break free from that a little bit and maybe to find support in other people who are more aligned with the kinds of things that you want to do. And maybe those people aren't, in your immediate town or whatever, but maybe you can connect with some people online or, take a long trip or move or something and just get new surroundings for a while.
And I think we're going to end it pretty much on that point because I think it's ideal, that whole idea of just escaping your world. And I think it's especially convenient for online people because we get sucked into this world of, living on Facebook or Google Plus or in your blog or other people's blogs. And you can kind of forget that the real world exists. And sometimes just going out there and going to a random event that you wouldn't go to and just meeting some people face to face who might be, printers or, accountants. Sometimes that can just open up your mind and go, I'm glad I'm doing what I'm doing because I'm not doing this. So
yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Well,
yeah. If you don't know what you want, just start with identifying what you don't want. Sometimes that's easier, right?
Absolutely. I think it always makes me feel better when sometimes I meet someone and I go, you know what? At least I don't have their job because I can't imagine I would enjoy that on a day-to-day basis. So
right.
That's good. Well, I think it's been an absolute pleasure. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. And I think the advice on offer is going to help a great deal of people. And just because you have that huge sort of ground-shaking event doesn't mean that you can't still take a step back. And it might not be a 6-month road trip, but it might just be a weekend away. And that can also obviously all make the difference. And I think doing something that you would never usually do is advice we can probably all take on board. And it certainly does open up them spheres. So, Corbett, thank you very much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me on. And good luck to everybody who's maybe making mistakes right now. We all do. It's part of life.
Absolutely. If Corbett can make them, we all can. So, indeed, viewer, thank you for watching and cheers.
Cheers.